Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about something that we both do in our business, which is sewing patterns, and specifically PDF, meaning digital patterns, right now at least. I guess we're going to talk a little bit about that too, and we wanted to make an episode where we take you from idea to the entire process of creating a pattern, which involves lots of different steps, several different programs, and we're going to do a really deep dive now, so you get a little bit, perhaps a better understanding of what it's like to develop a sewing pattern. It takes a lot of time and a lot of different tools in order to finish create that finished product. So Malena, could you perhaps talk a little bit about your sewing pattern business? How many sewing patterns do you have, and how long have you been having a sewing pattern line?
I think I've had the line for about 4 or 5 years now. And I have 8 patterns right now that you can find on Etsy. And I also have one free pattern that you get when you subscribe to my newsletter. So it's 9 pattern in total. And 1 baby joggers, 4 kids pattern, and then the rest is for women's wear. I'm working on my next one, next women's pattern right now. So I'm very, very right now in the moment of the creating the pattern.
That's excellent, because then you will get really like up to date and detailed, because it's sometimes when you don't do sewing patterns for a while, it takes a little bit to remember all the steps, because there are quite a lot of steps. So yeah, that's good to know. So you're going to get very up to date information, and also a little bit behind the scenes perhaps about your latest pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. How many do you have patterns?
Yes, I have currently 3 garment patterns, a pair of leggings, a knit top. If you're watching the YouTube video, I'm wearing the girly top now, which has puff sleeves. And I also have a cardigan pattern, the AV cardigan. And then I have 5 different accessories patterns. So I also do like mittens, berets, knit hats, but that you can sew, but it looks like they are knitted. So I have a mix of accessories and garment, but I definitely want to do more garment sewing patterns. But as we're going to talk about today, it takes a lot of time and effort to develop a new garment pattern. So Malena, can you tell me like the story, or where do you find inspiration for creating a new design?
That's a really hard question, because I'm not a designer, like a clothes designer. I became a patternmaker for a reason. I really like the workflow when somebody else has the idea, has the vision, and know exactly what they want, and I just, how can I say, recreate that. I create that their vision. I want to make it as exactly as they have seen it. So for me to come up with decide what the design should be, that's actually really hard. And for now, like I started very basic with a basic T-shirt that is both in a B cup and a D cup, so it has a bust dart and a pair of joggers. So I really started at the real basic staple garments that we have in a wardrobe. But now I feel like, okay, I'm ready for a little bit more, not eye candy maybe, but like a little bit more fancier garments with a little bit more details. Because I want to start easy as well, like with a good basic, because I didn't know how to make a PDF pattern. So I wanted to be more confident also with the whole process before I dive into the deep end with making more complicated garment. How is the design process for you?
I love the design process. I even when I was a kid, and that was probably the thing that drove me into sewing, was the fact that I was able to design my own clothes, and I definitely wanted to be a fashion designer, but I didn't pursue that avenue due to job safety and stuff like that. So I took a different avenue. So for me, the design aspect has always been like the biggest motivator for me. When it comes to developing my own sewing patterns, I don't cater to the beginner sewist, even though I currently only have sewing patterns that are made for knit fabric, so they are not overly difficult, but they are definitely slightly above the beginner stage. So all those 3 patterns that I have right now all have like details. So when I think I have this like this idea basically about the growth of my sewing pattern collection when it comes to garment, is that I want to help people build like a wardrobe of dressy basics that has some interesting details, both when it comes to visually and also that they are interesting to sew. And hopefully that if you sew one of my patterns, you will hopefully learn a few new techniques as well. So they are both should be like visually appealing, but they should also be an interesting sewing experience if you are venturing out from the beginner stage and maybe perhaps moving in more to the intermediate phase. So for me, I look at that, but then I think we both could agree that we don't only want to design patterns that we feel drawn to ourselves, and that's something that we might miss in our own wardrobe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to make a lot of samples, so you have to like it, and you have to want to wear the garments, of course. So yeah, no, definitely 100%. I only design what I also want to wear.
Yeah, it's very true, because you're so close to the product here. I mean, if you're a big fashion company, of course, you have many people working on the product. So I guess from your experience, you might feel a little bit more detached from everything, because you're right, as you are working on the pattern development, but you have the designer, you have the sample sewist, you have the buyers and the one working with fabrics and everything. But we are like one person, so we have to really have to be very, as you say, invested into the design and feel also confident. I think that this is a good thing, because that is something, if we know that we like it ourselves, that makes me at least more confident that other people will like it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a market for it if you want it yourself. Fingers crossed, there is.
Yeah. So, and I'm also currently just in the beginning throes of doing a new pattern. As I said, I'm trying to build like a basics wardrobes made with knit fabric. So I'm currently working on a pair of pants that is made with knit fabrics, but they are dressed with darts, and you can sew pleats or press pleats, I think it's called, and has pockets. So in my case then, I definitely look a little bit at trends as well, because that kind of garment has been somewhat popular now in Sweden, because I think after the pandemic and everything, people are really gravitating towards comfort still. And even though it's maybe tight fitting, you still want it to have a kinder fabric. So for me, I actually go out to stores basically and try a lot of different similar type of designs on me, and then try to see what I like and what I dislike, and just trying to figure out what kind of elements I want to pick from each type of, because every brand, when it comes to popular style, every brand makes their own interpretation. So for instance, with these knit pants, I felt a lot of them were either too tight fitting or they were too baggy, and I wanted to make something that was a little bit straighter, maybe just with a slight flare, so that it might feel more appealing to a wider audience. So that's a lot of like research as well that goes into just before I even design something. I want to make sure that there's, I can figure out what kind of style it would be and what would work. And yeah, so it's a lot of research. So how was your research process, Malena, when you're developing a new pattern?
What I usually have a silhouette in mind, what type of garment silhouette that I want. And since I have had such classic, like no details basically on the patterns, I really have been focusing on getting the absolute best fit that I can achieve. and having the details, like for the example pockets on the joggers, like that they should be really like easy to sew and feel very I can say proportionate to the garment, and also focusing on more details like getting in the sewing instructions, like how tips and tricks for how to sew it in a more like not efficient way maybe, but for example that when you sew together that how can I say press the seam allowance like against like the opposite direction, so you don't have too many layers when you sew together the crotch seam, for example. So those kind of small tips and tricks I really try to focus on. So I'm not so, I mean, you can really tell that, no, I'm not a fashion designer. I've come more from the technical aspect, like that kind of thing, things I think more about. And like, this is the kind of thing that I want to talk about instead of a specific fashion detail or trend or something. So yeah, I come with a more technical pattern making point of view.
Yeah, so you definitely are, and that's also why your sewing patterns are so great, because you definitely have that consideration, because you come from that technical background. And we should say that as when we are creating our sewing patterns, we have to make them doable for a home sewist, with maybe not that much experience or specialty machines and everything. So that also dictates what type of designs that we can do, right? Because we definitely have to consider like the construction that has to work and that has to make sense, so and be doable even if you are a home sewist. So it's a lot of consideration. I mean, the research process when you talk about drafting the pattern, that's just one step. There's a lot of things that goes into even the first sample, right? Because you, Malena, I should also say for full disclosure, you are also doing my sewing patterns. So we are talking about the same thing basically. So we don't have different methods for it. So the process for me is that I come up with the design and all the measurements and everything, and then Malena drafts a sewing pattern in those programs that you're going to talk about in a bit there, Malena. So I can't really say that much about that, but so Malena, when you have figure out the proportions and everything, how do you start with the actual pattern construction? Do you use paper or pen, or do you go straight to the computer? What's your process?
No, I only use the computer to draft the pattern. I have a pattern making program called Modaris Lectra, which is specifically made to create patterns with and send the patterns to the production, and they use the pattern files then to produce the garments. So it has been a little bit mind shift for me when I construct pattern now for the home sewing community. For example, when I construct patterns for the industry, you can't have fold at this edge, you have to make the full front piece, not I mean, in the industry they are not gonna fold the fabric and cut in half, no, you have to make it full. So that was the first thing that I need to think about, how would a home sewist want their pattern. But yeah, I start to create draft a pattern in the program, and I usually have a block pattern or base pattern, we call it, that is a very very how can I say, a starting point. For example, right now I have my Hazelhen t-shirt, and since I know that the fit is I really like the fit on that one, is a tight fitted t-shirt, I use that as a block if I create some other t-shirts or other knitted tops. So I have that, I start from that, and then I make the changes that I want. I print out the pattern. I have quite a big plotter, a printer. So I print it out and I sew a first sample based on that then. And then I see, do I want to make any updates, any changes? I do those changes again in the computer, and maybe I print out a new pattern and sew a new sample. So I mean, this process can of course be however long you want it. Like you can make, sometimes you get it right at the first sample, and sometimes you need several samples before you're happy. And I always start with a base size, and then after I'm happy with the fit in the base size, then I start to do the grading to make all the other sizes.
Because that's really interesting. You mentioned the base size. What type of sizing is usually the base size, either for you or in the garment industry? Because base size is that you have one size and then you grade from there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So my base size is 38. I don't know what's that in US size.
It's size 6, I think, and I think it's size 10 in the UK or 12. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So that one I use as a base size, mostly because I have a fitting dummy in that size, and I am more or less that size as well. So it's so convenient, of course, for me to be able to try on the garment and to wear them, and of course I look a lot on the fitting dummy as well, because I mean, even if you have the exact measurements, it's always a little bit with, you know, the posture and everything. So I really want to see that it looks good on the dummy, and then I do wearing tests myself just to make sure like it also feels comfortable when wearing, and not just try it on but actually wear it for a couple of days, because then you realize that, oh, when you have a cardigan on top, then it feels like this in the neckline, or you basically need to test it in your everyday life.
Yeah, so it's a lot of tweaks just before you're doing the grading, right? And I should also mention that I also use the base size of 38, and the reason for that is again quite practical, because most common. You should also say that every brand has their own unique sizing, so there's not just, even though the number might be the same, there might be small changes. So for instance, one brand might have a little extra room around the waist, for instance, or kind of like designing for a more mature body, for instance. So there's no you have to check every brand that you're buying from, regardless if it's in the stores or from a sewing pattern company, is that although many of our sizing systems are similar, they're not 100% identical, because we have kind of nailed in what type of consumer that we are, you know, gearing towards. So for instance, I am also using size 38, and again, it's a practical reason, because I am a rather typical size 38 with a few, of course, much shorter, but 8 centimeters shorter, which is I think 3 inches. So I can't do any fitting on myself without doing petite alterations. But again, and also I have like a slightly fuller tummy. But overall, it's very helpful to try on a garment on your own body, especially when you're working like us by ourselves. It definitely helps to use a size that is something that we can also test ourselves, because it's just easier that way to get the feel of the garment and everything like that. And I also have a dress dummy that is also about a size 38. So yeah, that's why I have the same size. And if someone is thinking about that and wondering what should I start, what is a good base size? Should you go? Do you know what I mean? There's some thinking process that goes into that to pick one size.
Yeah. I mean, you can work with this in different ways. One quite smart way. I mean, obviously you don't know this in advance, but like. Do the base size in the size that you think will sell the most, because then it's like, okay, I really can secure this size, that it has a good fit. But obviously you want it to have a good fit in all, like your complete size range. But the other sizes you then grade, and the further away you go from the base size, the trickier it can get. So I know I mean, you can also have 2 base sizes, for example, that you have one in 38, and then the next base size is, for example, size 50 or something. So you can start to have that as a base size as well, and then you grade the even bigger sizes from that size. So you can do this in whatever way you feel comfortable. And I know also some indie pattern company, I think they make an own base size for like every third size or something, to really secure that, you get the perfect fit for each and every size, because it is a little bit risky with the grading. I mean, when I say grading, I basically have like 1 point, chest point, for example, and then I write the coordination for the X and Y, how much that point should grow for each size. So that's why it can be a little bit, the further away you go from the base size, the more inaccurate it could be, I'd say. But of course, after I've done the grading, I always test the other sizes as well. Not every single size, but like the biggest and the smallest, and maybe some in between as well. And I have fitting dummies for them as well that I put them on, so I can really like try and see how if I like the fit or not. And preferably, like, I would really want to at that stage also send out that garment to a real tester as well. But it's difficult to find fitting models, so I'm not really there yet, but that's something I really wish to have in the future. Someone close to me or something that I could send garments in size 56, for example. That's my biggest size. So I could like really secure, be secure with the fit before I send it out to the test group, for example. But there's no rule like you have to have this as a base size or like that. You can choose completely by yourself. You can have also the size that is in the middle of your size range, or whatever size you are in, or I would say whatever size you have a dummy in as well, because that's it's going to be so much easier to actually test the garments.
Yeah, it's just basically making the process easier, and of course, if you are a bigger company, you have better resources, and you might have a better selection of dress dummies. I mean, dress dummies are they cost quite a lot, so it can also, understandably, it might not be the first thing you'll be able to invest in, having dummies in all these different sizes, just to ensure that the fit is right. And of course, it also depends on the type of garment. I mean, currently, both you and I are working primarily with knit fabrics, so they are perhaps a little bit more forgiving when it comes to. So if you're doing maybe a woven design that has a lot of pieces and are very close fitting, for instance, if you would do like a fitted dress, say in like a 50s style or something like that, very like intricately constructed, that then you might have to be even more like specific, trying on different sizes, because then if the grading is just a little bit off, it can really cause a lot of fitting issues. Whereas if you're, for instance, if you would do like an oversized tunic in knit fabric, then you still have to develop, make sure that the sizing is right, but it's definitely easier to get it right, I think, for the end consumer.
It's a little bit more forgiving, I would say, that kind of silhouette and type of garment. And this is also, I think, a good thing to think about, like what kind of sizes do you want? For example, we call it, I don't know if this is general in the sewing industry or if it's just the companies that I work with. You have single sizes or you have double sizes. So with single sizes, it is, as I said, 38, then 40, 42, 44, that's European sizes. But then you can also have double sizes, which is small, medium, large, extra large. Again, this is the issue as well, because there's no rules how small, medium, large are used. So every single company can use it in a different way. So the steps between each size it can be different. So that's why it's always a little bit tricky to work with those sizes. So you need to have that in mind before you actually start. Like what kind of strategy do I want to have the sizes? I have chosen to always use European sizes. Again, 38, 40, 42. It's not common to have those sizes on jersey because it's quite small steps in between the sizes. So it's very common to have it in woven, because then, as you talked about, you don't have that much ease, and you want to be able to have a tight fitted garment, then you have to have small steps in between the sizes to really for everyone to fit them well. But I've chosen to do that as well on jersey, just because then it's so much easier to get that exact size that you are, that it's not, since it's not that big of a jump in between those sizes. So that's why jersey and knit always have, not always, but most of the time have like small, medium, large, because they can have a little bit bigger jumps in between the sizes then, and you don't have to produce that many actual sizes. So that's a little bit how it might work in the industry, and again, it depends from company to company how they are going to use it. But have a good, if you are going to start up your own company, like have a good think about how to work with sizes, because it can be a little bit tricky and difficult to change after a while.
Yeah, because if you realize that your sizing system doesn't work for your ideal customer base, then you're going to have to update a lot of patterns if you're already starting to release patterns. And when you say jumps, Malena, it's the extra width or length or whatever. So for instance, just giving an arbitrary number in Europe is usually in the lower range. It's about 4 centimeters, which is like almost 2 inches, usually between each size in the chest circumference, for instance. So, and traditionally when they talk about double sizing, right, it's because then they have that's very simplified, because as Malena says, it's not that simple, but it could be then 8 centimeters, for instance. So you're basically jumping over one.
Yeah.
So that's probably, and I think that's, but it's usually that kind of. So there's a few centimeters or a couple of inches or slightly less between each size normally. So that gives you an idea that it's quite small steps. So that's why you can, depending on what type of fabric you're using, you might be able to switch between sizes that are either going up or down, because it's actually, it won't be that huge difference, because 4 centimeters, it's for you using the metric system, it's not that much. It can definitely, if it's woven very stiff, tight fitting, absolutely it's going to cause some troubles. But if you're working with knit, you have more options, so you don't have to be or if you're like between sizes, so to speak, it's usually, it depending, it's there's no like exact that's a good thing about using this system even for knits, because it ensures that you can actually get a good fit even if you're between sizes, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And after I've done with the grading and I'm happy with that, then I actually start to create my PDF patterns. So then I can export my pattern from my like real pattern making program to it's called a DXF file, and that file is like you can open it with different programs, and then I can import it into Illustrator, and from there I actually start to create the PDF pattern. So then, but I mean when you open it up in Illustrator, it's not pretty. It takes a lot of work to make it look pretty, so to say, because first of all, like all the notches are in one layer. I have both in my patterns. I include both sewing lines and seam allowance lines, so those are in different layers as well. And there are just like, I don't know why it's something with the file. It comes like thousands other small types of things that you just have to delete and clean up, basically. But then I kind of like this job and I like this step, and I don't, because it's very time consuming, but it's the kind of work that you can do it while you listen to a podcast. Like you select a line, draw it to the right layer, the right size layer, and then you choose a color for it, and you do it for the next and next and next, and make sure that all the notches comes into this right line or right layer. You pick all the right lines, and I think I have 13 sizes. So then in the file where I also both have sewing line and seam lines, then I have 26 different layers that I need to put every single line, notch everything in to make sure everything is right and make sure that everything has the same, like the dashed line or the color, so you can instantly see which one is your size. And of course add all the information also, that fold, cut on fold, and this is the front piece, this is the back piece, the grain lines, what else, all the information on those different pattern pieces.
The name of the pattern and a size number on each layer as well, so that you know which size you're cutting out as well.
Yeah, so it takes a while to do this, but again, it's quite nice to just sit and listen to an audiobook and do it. But since this is a so time-consuming part, as I talked about, I always send out my patterns to a test group. I'm very confident about the fit before I send it to the test group. When I do want, obviously, the testers to give me feedback on the fit, but I have tried it on my own dummies. I have worked a lot with the grading, so it's more of I want a confirmation from the testers. Because I don't want to redo that work, creating it into a PDF pattern. So I'm and also I don't want to. I mean, the testers. I don't want to waste their time and fabric on a bad fitted garment. Absolutely not. Like I am 99.9% sure of the fit when I send it out.
Yeah, but you're also a professional that has worked in this industry for almost 15 years. So it doesn't come, your confidence comes from the fact that you're very, very experienced within pattern making and grading. So you should also say that.
Yeah, I mean, I do take a lot of pride in my work and what I do. I don't, like a lot of things I can have the bar set quite low, done is better than perfect, just do it, just get it out. But no, when it comes to the patterns, it has to be accurate, not millimeter accurate, a tenth of a millimeter accurate that pattern program is also, I mean, you can measure every single line and really a tenth of a millimeter accuracy. It can be a little bit dangerous when you become obsessed perfectionist about it, but yeah, it has to be correct. And if it's not, then it's obviously a mistake, and I hope then the testers will notice it if I missed something, because obviously that could happen as well. But this part about creating it to a PDF, that one you do yourself. If I help you, for example, I make the pattern, but then I send out the DXF file to you. So you all also do this process.
I do, yes. And so I get the graded files from you. First, similar to Malena, I get the one sizing, 38 in this case, and then I do samples and figure out, any changes to the proportions or placements of things. And then you usually grade. I have a friend of mine who's size 56, which I think is size 22 in the US. So I create a sample garment for her as well, so I know that the design will work in that upper size range as well. Because just like Malena says, you don't want to go through all the other steps that you just described before you have any idea of what your pattern will look like on different bodies. So that's definitely, because it's so time consuming. Because when you send it out to testers, it has to be like a finished pattern, basically, because otherwise it will be super confusing for them. But it's different because, unlike you, I don't work with pattern testers anymore. I sew 3 sizes, the largest and the middle, and then I usually sew a smaller size that I also try on a person that has in the lower size range. So I only actually sew 3 different sizes before I sew and test 3 different sizes before I release the pattern. But again, I'm working with the pro, Malena, so because she is so confident, I am so confident, and I've never heard anyone, no one has gotten in touch with me about the grading and didn't feel that it matched their expectations. So I am again very confident because I'm working with Malena, and I'm very confident also in my own size chart that I also put a lot of effort into creating for my target audience and make a lot of considerations. So yeah. Otherwise, the process is similar to me. I import the DX file into Adobe Illustrator, which is I think the most common program that is used for creating PDF patterns. And we both do layered sizes. So you have to create one layer for each size. And then it's a lot of manual labor. And I too enjoy it because it's such a lot of things when you run your own business requires a lot of concentration and a lot of ID work and but this is very systematic. You have to be really, it's not difficult, but you have to be very concentrated. And I don't use colors. I just use different dash in black. So it's a little bit different process, but it's roughly the same thing. And it takes quite a lot of time, and you have to be super concentrated because it's so easy to miss that you maybe one size you do the wrong color or the wrong dash line on one piece because you're suddenly you have 12 14 different layers and you're like, where were I? Where did I end up in? And also you have to go back and ensure, so when you close you hide layers, so you have to go and then check that each and every single piece is on every single layer. So it's a lot of very concentrated focus work, but also making sure that the finished product looks very professional and well thought out, and the sizing is easy to navigate, even though there are so many different sizes. It definitely helps, but I love the fact that you can now work with layers, because that makes it easier when you're printing the pattern, because you can hide every size that you're not printing, so you don't have to be too how should I say, confused by all the lines that you might be if you have a paper pattern and you try to follow the exact line. So I love the layered option. I think most of us use that right now when we're creating, both creating and of course sewing patterns that you only print your size.
Yeah, I mean, it's so convenient. And we can also say that the way we work, well, I guess you work like this as well in Illustrator, is that we have the pages a little bit smaller than an A4 or letter size, and then we have them how can you say, tucked right edge to edge to each other, so there's no spacing in between them, the pages. And then you can place your pattern on top of that, then so you get when you create the PDF pattern and you print them out, they all line up in the correct way. It's a little bit difficult to explain. Maybe you can do it better.
Yeah, so the name of the function in English, I think, is called artboards, I think.
Artboards, yeah.
Yeah, so you create a grid of, and they are basically just aligned to each other. So you can say that you want to have 4 columns and 5 rows, and that could be the entire pattern. So for instance, so we don't see individual pages, we just see this grid of artboards or paper. So it's very easy to navigate, and only when we are done with the entire pattern, then we save it as a PDF file, and then Adobe Illustrator automatically creates single pages. And also, of course, depending, we use a little different ways, but with markers, so that you can tape them together, so it's very easy to see, because most of people only have small printers that's small, letter or A4. So that's very important that it's very easy for you to piece the pattern pieces together. So you shouldn't be confused. So that we have to also add numbers or markers. So there's a whole system, right? It's not just the actual pattern. It's also to make sure that the assembly sequence is easy for you to understand when you buy one of us patterns, right?
Yeah, and that's a good thing to have to really work on that from the beginning and do it and try it out and see that it's correct, and then you use it as like a template, for example. So you obviously don't have to redo that for every single pattern. You just open up the template again, and then you add your new pattern on top of it. So it's so that kind of setup is the same for all my patterns.
Yeah, it's the same for me. But of course, sometimes you have to change because some pattern requires less pages. So you might have to tweak a little bit or remove something. But I also have a template that I've, just like you have saved, that I also use my base always. So again, if you want to start a sewing pattern line, I definitely recommend that you check out what a lot of other businesses are doing and pick the best ones. And then use that as a guide, because you really have to think of it as a consumer perspective and make sure that because we totally understand that it's because we are also home sewers, and I've taped so many PDF patterns in my day, so I totally understand that it's very time consuming. So we want to make sure that it's as easy as we can on our side, but also due to the fact that more and more people are sending away patterns to print them on the larger format, right? We both do also a large size, how do you call it, copy shop or large size print files, right, Malena? You do that.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. I have A0, so that's a really large page, basically. Yeah.
So that's how we do it, and that works really well. And neither of us is doing projector files at the moment, but you recently told me very interesting statistics regarding that, because I sometimes get requests for getting my patterns into projector files, and I've been hesitant because it's even more things to do. But Malena, you had some revealing number to share.
Yeah, I just joined a Facebook group that had 92,000 people in it that were using projectors. So there's a crowd out there.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to hear, and it's gonna. Yeah, I when you said the number, I was like, yeah, it definitely got my brain working as well. And maybe I shouldn't be so dismissive of the putting the extra effort into that, but. Yeah, we're probably going to see, we're recording this in 2024, in 5 years, everything might have changed again. So we have no idea. So we have to probably keep changing some of the system of how we create digital patterns. We're not like having that process not finished. It's going to change over and over again, I think.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think it's like that much work to create the actual like projector file. I mean, it's still I think it's still a PDF file. I'm just like the little information that I read, like a file, but it's built up in a little bit different way. So if you have the pattern, like you have the fit, you have the pattern, you have made it already, and you have the sewing instruction that we will talk about soon as well. I don't think from our part that creating the projector file might be that time consuming. I mean, considering we have already put in so much work and effort. So, but again, this is me just hoping. So fingers crossed. It shouldn't be that complicated. I mean, the most difficult part is, of course, developing the pattern. So if you get that one done, fingers crossed. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious. I'm very curious to this, so I will definitely do some more research on it.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to hear what you find out, and if you end up also offering projector files. And of course, if you listening to this and are a projector person, we would love to hear your feedback as well on why you find this valuable, and if it's a deal breaker, perhaps if you're considering buying a sewing pattern, we are definitely interested to hear your thoughts behind that, because we are, we understand that we have to adapt, of course, if the market changes. So yeah, it's just that we sometimes, we're a little bit hesitant because it's like, I think for me, mostly it's just that it's more files to keep organized, and if you discover something that you want to change or add something and stuff like that, it's just more files that you need to update and send out, and it's just the stuff like that kind of makes me a little bit hesitant as well, because if you try to, I just fear that if I have like 5 different formats for everything, it's going to be a nightmare to keep it organized. But yeah, that's just me.
Yeah, no, that's a really valid point. It's another, it's of course additional work. For me, I would say in the process of making the sewing instructions, that's the most, how do you say it, the biggest hurdle. Like that's the thing that I'm like, I don't want to do this. But that's your favorite part, right?
Yeah, it is my favorite part. It takes so much time, but I love it. And I should also I try to think, when do I do the sewing instructions? I try to think in what order I do it. Is it before I do all the formatting in Illustrator, afterwards? A little bit depends, I think. It's usually like a little bit happens. Sometimes I take a break and I do the rest thing. So I guess there are 2 main ways of doing pattern instructions. Either you use photos or you use illustrations. And also, if you're familiar with the German fashion magazine Burda Style, you can also do just in written style. So that's how many of us here in Northern Europe began sewing. So we can actually read. I'm not saying it's ideal, but that's also, I don't think it's a big thing in the indie sewing pattern business that you just have written illustration. I think a lot of users will be quite disappointed, but yeah, so most of us is doing illustration, and I have from the start only used illustrations. So I do that, and I do that again in Adobe Illustrator, and then I do the design of the sewing instructions in Adobe InDesign, which is like the sibling software. InDesign, you use it for creating books and newspapers and magazines. So that is why I think it was relatively easy for me, because I come from the newspaper world. So I used to do newspaper pages. So for me, getting into doing that in InDesign was not such a big step for me that it might be for other people, because I know some people also do instructions in Illustrator because they are much more comfortable in doing that. But I prefer InDesign. And yes, I put so much effort into the technical illustrations, which I'm self-taught in. But my reasoning behind that is that I'm basically just building this massive library of technical illustrations. So for instance, if you get our new book, Fit for Knits, a lot of those illustrations for the sewing instructions are actually adapted from my own sewing instructions. I just changed the colors maybe and a few details. So I didn't have to start from scratch, even though there's a lot of technical illustration in that book. I could just go back to my own library and reuse quite a few of those illustrations. So my thinking is that I'm basically over the years just building a bigger, because if you're sewing a knit top, it's not going to be that of a big difference between the illustrations. So that's one of the reason I'm doing illustrations and not photos. And secondly, I feel if you're using a home printer, it can be very fickle when it comes to photos. So I always feel confident in that, because I use grayscale illustrations, that it will be easier. There's less room for error if your old printer is kind of not great on making photos. So that's why that's also my reasoning for that. So yeah, I love it. But it takes me a lot of time. So, but it's definitely, I enjoy that the most, for sure.
Yeah, and I can enjoy the illustration parts as well, because I've started to do illustrations also now. On my first patterns, I have pictures, but the illustrations, it's a little bit the same. Like, you get into the zone. You can listen to podcasts and just do the illustrations. It's the actual writing that is like that. I don't know how to write.
Why do you find that so challenging?
Have you seen Modern Family, the TV show?
No.
Lily is gonna have a speech for her best friend at his wedding, and she is like, no, I haven't prepared. It's just words coming out from my mouth. Words. And I feel exactly like that. I was like, what do I write? How? So people will understand me. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not a journalist. I'm not good with words. So it's just, it's not my thing.
Yeah, and it's also nice to hear because we can't be like everything can't be easy. That would be so weird if we were one person and we thought that every single step in creating a sewing pattern was easy and felt natural to us. So, and it's also really good. I love that you addressed this because we are obviously doing everything ourselves, or mostly. Then I'm not doing the actual pattern, but that also goes to show how many different kind of mediums that you have to be able to work with when you're doing a pattern, because it's not just the pattern. You have to do pattern making, and you have to be a designer, and you have to do illustrations or take photos, and you also have to write instructions and probably a lot of other steps that I can't remember right now, but that just gives you an idea of how much effort that goes into creating a sewing pattern. So then again, you will understand why it takes quite a lot of time from the idea that having a sewing pattern out there. And we haven't even mentioned, like taking photos for the web shop and the marketing and the pattern cover and everything like that. So there are so many different steps that are involved in creating the finished product. So you can't rush that. It's like it takes how should I say? I've seen a lot of now, but I guess there are bigger teams, of course. There are like the bigger independent sewing pattern companies. I think many of them now have a subscription model where they are releasing one pattern each month. So they have to run a really tight ship and being many patterns ahead all the time, I would say. What have you, Malena, from your perspective, have you considered that business model or?
No. I also seen it, heard it, thought about it, but for me, I mean, this is not my bread and butter. I work as a freelance pattern maker. That is like my main job. I work with other companies. So whenever I don't have a freelance job, then I do this. So I can't, and I have to, if I get a job offer, I mean, of course, I have to take it. So then I would never be comfortable with a subscription, because then I would have to produce it in a certain amount of time. And as I said in the beginning, it was 4 or 5 years since I started my own line, and I have now in total 9 patterns. Like, it's not a lot per year. And I mean, obviously during this time, well, I had a baby, of course, also, so that took a little bit of time. But I mean, there were like some periods where like I didn't do anything with my own patterns for 3-4 months because I was so busy having freelance work. So I can't commit to say that yes, I will release new patterns in a certain pace. It really depends on other things. So it's not at the moment. I like the idea. I think it's a good idea. But for me, it's not workable. Have you thought about it?
No, not for a second. But basically, a similar reason that you have. I first of all, even though for context, I work part-time at a day job, and then I run the Last Stitch as my other job. So I have these 2 legs to stand on, and even though I don't work full-time at my day job, my time is still limited, and sewing patterns is not my main source of income. It comes from my sewing books and different ad revenues from having the blog and YouTube channel, similar type of streams of income, and I also do some freelance work as well. So for me, the sewing patterns is definitely the smallest leg, and I have also not released that many patterns, so it's understandable. I don't think people know me primarily as a sewing pattern brand. So for me to put that stress on myself, I would never ever do that. as I said, I think it's a sound business model, because then you will have reoccurring income, but you will also have what they call churn. Is that every month people will, I mean, I don't know if they have a 12-month subscription or whatever, but for a good price, but eventually people will not resubscribe, because suddenly they may feel, okay, but I have gotten like 12 patterns and I've only managed to sew 3, so maybe I should like start sewing the other ones and, you know, pause my subscription. So from a business perspective, you have to keep getting new people into that ecosystem, because every month or every year or however the cycle is, you're gonna lose a pretty substantial amount of customers. So it's not like it's not secure money, because you have to keep on getting new customers in to just, so I think a lot of, so, and also the other risky thing is that you will have, it's the same work to create a pattern that has, and if you only have 10 subscribers or you have 1,000 subscribers, but it's going to cost you the same amount of money and the same amount of time to develop the pattern, but your revenue will be vastly different. So it's a financial risk that you're taking, and if you're selling like yearly subscriptions for a reduced fee, then you basically make a commitment, unless you want to do refunds for at least 12 months. So to me, I think you have to have a very, very good system in place and a lot of cash flow to keep that team going, to ensure, even though it might take a while before you build up a large enough subscription base. So I would only do this if I was a big sewing pattern brand with a large following, a large brand awareness. I would never, ever, ever recommend that doing someone at our small scale.
Yeah, no, as you said, it is a big commitment to guarantee that. That's also, I don't know how long it's going to take also to develop a pattern, how many samples I want before I'm happy with it, and so I can't guarantee the timeline. So that's the main reason why I don't want to do it. But I have to say that one thing you talked about a little bit earlier about the Burda, the magazine's instructions, and how indie patterns instructions, sewing instructions are. I think it's so much fun to see that how the indie companies have changed the business, I would say, because they have raised the bar so high on how the sewing instructions should be, compared to, well, what I was used to with the Burda instructions. I mean, it was basically like just 10 points, like with, very short description of what to do. And now the indie companies come and make fantastic illustrations of things. So I think it's so fun to see how small companies can have such a huge impact. Because now I don't know how Burda and the Big Four are working right now, but I think, haven't they also needed to raise the bar of their instructions?
Yes, they have. Yeah, you bring up a great point for context. If you haven't, it's basically cut the pieces, sew them together.
Start with the shoulders, then this and that.
Yeah. You sew the zipper. That's like sew the pockets. And in the older issues, they had sometimes 1 or 2 illustrations to show like how to sew a zipper, for instance, because as we all know, sewing a zipper, it's a tricky thing if you're not familiar with it. But yeah, you're very right, Malena, because now Burda at least has always at least one, and now I think they have expanded to perhaps 2 or 3 garments in each issue that comes with an illustrated step-by-step instructions. So you basically get this like really detailed, very ambitious. They do a great job with it. So they have absolutely, and I totally agree with you. It's the indie sewing pattern companies that kind of change that and raise the bar and the expectations of the consumer. So absolutely, but that should also means that us, of course, we have to keep, as I said, I don't think a lot of us would get away with doing written instructions. I think we would have a lot of disappointed customers. So no, that's that we have to, and I think it's helpful because if you're not familiar with sewing, it's very, very difficult to understand written instructions.
Yeah, no, you have to. It's such a visual thing, so I need to see it to understand it.
Yeah. So I think we have talked now about an hour about just sewing patterns, and we would love. I know if you're interested, there's a lot of like subtopics to explore here, and we have talked perhaps doing one episode about all the different type of softwares that you can use when you're doing your own sewing patterns and pros and cons with that, because we have a little bit to say about that as well, and maybe invite a guest that has some other experiences. So. And if you want to have other topics that you want to know about when it comes to sewing patterns, just drop us a comment over at we also have an Instagram account, right, Malena? It's called
Stitching Talespod.
Yes, it's like a visual companion, so you can also go there and see photos and illustrations, so you get a little bit more visual if you're just listening to this podcast. And so you can definitely go there and drop a comment. And of course, you can also watch the podcast on YouTube and of course leave a comment there as well, because we really like to know if you have more questions and topics that you want us to go more in depth about when it comes to developing sewing patterns. And of course, other topics as well that you want us to talk about in the future. So I think that was about it, Malena, or have you forgotten something?
No, I mean, we could go on and on about talking about PDF patterns for like 2 more hours, so we have to stop somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. But we will definitely do more topics like this in the future. So thank you so much for listening. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.